Then I went through the work of whitewashing my home, removing everything that represented me, my family, my culture, everything. And then in a couple of days, I got the appraisal report back. I was right. The only thing bringing down the value of my home was me.
The story of Paul and Tanisha Austin has gone viral, shared all across the world.
My wife went through her bathroom, get rid of her hair products, all of our books and our art. Like, just literally like, okay, did we miss something? We had a conversation with one of our white friends, and she was like, no problem, I'll be Tanisha.
So it appraised for 1.482.
Almost 1.5, $500,000 more.
And like, how does that happen?
It's one of those stories that you start looking into and it just balloons and becomes bigger and bigger.
I think what we're seeing out of this is that the problem is extremely widespread.
The house is the house. Why would you go through such ridiculous lengths to belittle black people and devalue them?
We found that homes in black neighborhoods are underpriced by about $48,000 per home. This is happening all over the United States, robbing families of the money people use to live the American dream.
We're going to put the entire appraisal industry under the microscope.
If you think black people are being discriminated when their property is being appraised, would you kindly raise your hand? One person on the panel.
And these stories are shocking, and they are evidence that systemic change is urgently needed.
The system itself is so broken.
Your home is valued for $25,000 less than 2 doors down from you. How does that happen to the HUD secretary?
You know, because I live in a black neighborhood.
That's not what you call regulation. That's not what you call oversight. That's not, of course, what you call fairness.
We pay our taxes like everybody else does, so why is it that I'm being treated this way?
Welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. As many know, Black and Latino families have had their homes appraised for up to $500,000 less than expected, and racial bias may play a significant factor. In fact, many say it does play a significant factor. According to an ABC-owned television station's data analysis of more than 50 million home loans, refinance applications in predominantly Black neighborhoods are nearly 5 times more likely to be underappraised than in white communities. The analysis found that home purchase loans in Black neighborhoods are more than twice as likely to be appraised undervalued. To raise awareness on this systemic issue affecting families across America and to equip viewers with information on what they can do if they find themselves lowballed in an appraisal, ABC-owned television stations has produced, quote, Our America Lowballed. Joining us to talk about this is Julian Glover, the executive producer for Our America Lowballed. Julian, thanks for joining the Black Press of America's Let It Be Known.
I'm so happy to be with you all today to talk about this really important topic that we've been working extremely hard on for almost 2 years now at this point.
Yeah, and Julian, I watched the trailer, and it's a story that many of us already know about. But tell us, this thing dives into how it got to be that way. It dives into the effects. This family in that in the trailer is absolutely devastated for no other reason because of their Blackness.
It's really a tough topic to interview these families on and hear these really intimate stories of how they felt when they received an appraisal that they just believed was far lower than they should have received. I'll talk about the family that you mentioned off the top there, the Austins in Marin City, California. A lot of people know that story all across the country, and it's a story that we broke in February of last year. An unbelievable story of this incredible family in Marin City, really pillars of this community that's really a enclave of Black folks in the Northern Bay Area in Marin County. they had their home appraised for $500,000 less than they expected it. They had a white friend stand in on a second appraisal. They took down all the family artwork, their pictures, their books, hair products. I mean, think about that. Going to your bathroom and taking down the hair products. The white friend stands in, they get their second appraisal, and the home value jumps by $500,000. But it's not just happening in the Bay Area. It's not just happening in California. Our data analysis found that it's happening truly all across the country. And this is a systemic issue.
We did a story, Julian, not long ago, perhaps a few weeks ago, a family in Baltimore, same thing. This is systemic, as you've noted in the trailer. It's very much a systemic issue. Are you finding, it's probably not a surprise, but what, has there been a case so far you found that may have surprised you more than others?
Well, I think the case out of Marin City is one that's so shocking, and that's the one that I think so many people grappled around and kind of latched on. Because, I mean, when you think about the difference in the home appraisals, $500,000. I mean, most homes across the country don't cost $500,000.
Right.
So when you're talking about $500,000 in equity that you're missing out on, I mean, it's incredible. Another family that we feature in the documentary, and she's actually the first person featured in the trailer, is that of Carlette Duffy out of Indianapolis. And she quite literally had her home value double after she did the exact same thing of whitewashing her home, having a white friend and her husband stand in a subsequent home appraisal. So, I mean, this is affecting Americans. This is affecting Black and Latino Americans, in the bank account. When we're talking about the pandemic, when interest rates were historically low, why wouldn't you want to refinance, try and save some money on that mortgage every month? Or maybe you wanted to do a cash out refi, spruce up the home a little bit, do some home improvements. Maybe you wanted to take some money out to help send your kid to college, start a business. If when you go and do that refinance application, the home is appraised for less than it needs to be in that loan to value ratio, doesn't hit that 80% mark, then all of a sudden you can't refinance. You can't save money on your mortgage. You can't send your kid to college. So when we talk about creating and passing down intergenerational wealth, the appraisal system in this country is key in that. And until we see some adjustments in Americans and Black and brown Americans being able to get fair home appraisal values, it's going to be really difficult to close that racial wealth gap in the country.
And also in our reporting, and I don't know where you are yet in this story that you'll be telling, but we found that basically the industry itself, the appraisal industry, is mostly, when I say mostly, we're talking about almost 100% white. That is a problem as well, right?
That was certainly a shocking statistic for us to come across. One of the sources that we interview in the piece described it as the whitest industry in America.
Wow.
And this is a Black woman who's an appraiser. I mean, basically a unicorn, right? When you talk about this industry that is around 96% white and 70% male, this is quite literally often a profession that is passed down from father to son and so on and so forth, and has been throughout the generations for many years to come. And a part of the reason that there's, almost a gatekeeping, right, so to speak, when it comes to this industry is because currently, in order to get into it, you need over 1,000 hours of supervised training. And someone has to agree to take you on as an appraiser. In the documentary, you'll hear from that Black female appraiser that I mentioned, and she tells this incredible story of how it was so difficult for her to go out there and get a supervisory appraiser until she changed her name on her resume.
Wow.
From Jillian White to Jay White, and then all of a sudden the interviews, came. It was like the floodgates open, right? And she was getting interviews left, right, and center. But even when she showed up to the office to do the interviews in person, she says the supervisory appraiser, his demeanor completely changed. You're too qualified to do this job now. So again, one of the whitest industries in America that has essentially been passed down from generation to generation for years to come. And we talk about the solutions to try and change that around, to try and get more Black and brown folks in this industry that we just noted is so key to allowing Black and brown folks to create intergenerational wealth.
We're talking with Julian Glover, the executive producer for Our America Lowballed. You'll be able to see this on the ABC television networks. Julian, when this was first brought to ABC, first of all, was it taken anywhere else? So you don't have to name the places, but what was it taken anywhere else? And was it how warmly was it initially received, if at all?
Well, it's kind of an interesting way how this all came together. It all started with that first story that I'll be quite honest, I stumbled into in Marin City, California, February of last year. It started with that one story, and that story went viral. I mean, I had millions of views on that just like 15, 20-second clip of Paul Austin talking about how he took down all of those uh, family photos, artwork, et cetera, whitewashed his home, and then had the home appraised for $500,000 more. After that thing went viral, I started hearing from families, of course, all across the Bay Area, but truly all across the country saying, I believe I've also been lowballed in an appraisal. What do I do? And that started a series of subsequent reports, hearing and telling the stories of families here in the Bay Area, but all across the country. And that's when, I essentially said, we got to do something more. This is more than just a one-off story. It's more than just a series of stories. We have to see how we can make an impact on this. So we got the documentary essentially greenlit at the top of this year, and we've been working hard on it ever since.
Yeah, at 2008, just to underscore how gut-wrenching this really is, a 2008 report from the Brookings Institution estimates that homes in predominantly Black neighborhoods are devalued by, get this, $156 billion with a B, billion dollars, an average of 48,000 per home. Uh, I mean, when you're putting this together and you see and you find that, Julian, what place does it put you as the producer here, as the executive producer? Where's your mindset at that point when you see that and the raw numbers?
It's urgent. I mean, it is urgent, and it's imperative that we fix this problem. Once you keep digging and finding out exactly how big of a problem this truly is one that keeps you up late at night. That you say, we got to keep working on this. We take this all the way to Washington. We hear from Vice President Kamala Harris, the HUD Secretary Marsha Fudge, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who has authored legislation to hopefully shore up and fix the appraisal industry so it's more equitable for all. But when you think about, first of all, the racial home ownership gap in this country, white Americans, 74% of them own their own home. That number is only 44% for Black Americans, right? And when you think about, well, why is that? One of the things is when you don't have something to pass down to your future generations, to your kids and your grandkids, when they don't have that nest egg to be able to take money out of to maybe help them with the down payment, I mean, it's an entire trickle down effect. And this is really dated back to our country for almost 100 years now with the advent of redlining, something that was sanctioned by federal, state, and local governments, restricting where Black folks could own homes and where they could.
Yeah. Well, Julian, we should note that he is an Emmy winner and an Edward R. Murrow Award winner for excellence in reporting on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Congratulations to all of that too. This sounds like a winner in itself, Lowballed. And Julian, when you think about impactful reporting and doing things of this nature, because this is it sounds very impactful, and you're saying the series is going to be you're going to continue because it's not enough just to do one and done, which is it's great to hear. As you go along, do you expect to learn any more, Julian? Because we think we know it all. That $156 billion really jumps out. But do you expect that as you go on, you're going to learn even more devastating facts?
Well, what I want to know and what I want to learn at this point is what's going to be done about it. It's one thing to talk about it, but how are we going to fix this issue? So President Biden, the Biden-Harris administration, they took the bold step last year to create an interagency task force to come up with solutions. They released that report in March, and the Austins from Marin City, California, they were there as that report was released. They were there telling their stories to the HUD Secretary, to Vice President Kamala Harris. But that was in March, and here we are in October, and some concrete changes need to happen in order to stop these lowball appraisals and restore the equity in Black communities that they deserve. So that's what I'm looking forward to learning and continuing the reporting on as we talk about what can we do to fix this. Once some of those initial fixes are in place, are they actually having the impact that we need, again, to see that equity restored in Black communities?
Yeah, and speaking of the fixes, and your reporting, Julian, I'm sure, well, I would imagine you, I should say it that way. I imagine you've spoken with lawmakers. I imagine you've spoken with a good number of people. What's on the table, and what you've seen, what you may have seen so far that's on the table, is it enough?
Well, I think a lot of what we've seen so far are suggestions, but not concrete action. I think some of the suggestions are certainly interesting. And one big one that the appraisal industry at large has certainly gotten behind is diversifying the appraisal field. They have flat out said, yes, we realize that there is a problem with diversity in the field. They have launched a number of initiatives to try and get more Black and brown folks into the field. One of the things is shortening the number of hours that you need to be able to get that appraisal license, for one thing. Maybe waiving the college degree requirement, because you also are currently required to have a bachelor's degree to get into appraising. And most appraisals will tell you, what you have to go through so much training in order to become an appraiser. The college degree really isn't important to you being able to complete your job every day. Another thing that's really interesting that's come up a number of times is, one, can technology be a part of the solution? So using more of these automated models, AI essentially, to be able to spit out appraisals without an actual human having to go to the home. Another interesting solution is what they're calling a bifurcated appraisal. That's essentially a fancy term for saying two people are doing the job. One person would come to the home, they take the pictures, they do the measurements, and then they send it through a system that would scrub pets, people, pictures, and any artwork from the photos that another person would then see, and then they would do the analysis of the home. So essentially, the second person is doing the appraisal blind. They have no way of knowing the race, the gender, any of the other protected classes, right, that could potentially influence an appraised value. One really interesting thing, though, I'll tell you, that came up in our interview with Congresswoman Maxine Waters in the legislation that she has authored, is a clause that essentially says if an appraiser is found to have discriminated against a family, a homeowner, in that appraised value, they would potentially be on the hook for the difference in appraisals for that appraisal gap.
Wow.
So think about the Austin family in Marin City, California,
That would
for
put an
example,
end to
right?
it.
$500,000. That was the appraisal gap. So imagine the appraiser then being on the hook for $500,000. As she says, and you'll see in the documentary, like you just said as well, I think that would certainly get some folks in line.
Yeah, it's almost like that argument about qualified immunity with police officers. You take that off the table, but and maybe we'll have some different outcomes there too. But we're talking about lowballed here. What's going on in the appraisal industry? How does one? First of all, is that an industry, Julian? Because people have to eat. They have to pay their bills. Is that an industry that someone can look for a family sustaining job?
It certainly is. And it's been a really great paying job the last couple of years when the market was red hot during the pandemic, right? When lots of more folks were buying homes, people were staying in their homes. They said, instead of buying and going somewhere else, I want to renovate, right? So they were doing, and the interest rates were so low during the pandemic as well. So they were doing so many appraisals. It's obviously slowed down right now as the market cools off a bit and those interest rates continue to climb. But for a lot of people, this is a very nice profession. I mean, it can be a profession that is well into the six figures. And it certainly was that over the last couple of years, again, when the market was just so hot.
And I'm sorry, Julian, I didn't mean to step on you.
Go for it.
But okay, given that and the lack of African American participation in that, is there an awareness that these, because we tend to focus on certain professions, but we don't necessarily talk about being appraisers, right? Is there an awareness that maybe a campaign that needs to happen?
I certainly think so. And again, in talking about the solutions that folks in the appraisal industry have certainly gotten behind and was a part of the pledges that came forth from the Biden-Harris administration, it is more outreach to Black and Brown communities, trying to work on initiatives to be on the campuses of HBCUs, right? To let folks know this is a profession. And again, it can be a well-paying profession that you can get into. And we go back to what I said before. This has for so long, for several generations now, been a profession that's been passed down from father to son and so on and so forth. So we desperately need more women in the field, and we certainly need more people of color in the field too.
And Julian, just so our audience will know, it's not something that you did alone. You looked at stats and you came up with these conclusions and maybe talked to a couple of families. You had a team that analyzed a whole lot of data, correct?
Yeah, the ABC-owned television stations have an absolutely fabulous data journalism team. I mean, whip smart folks, and they are dedicated and seated in each of our newsrooms from the Bay Area to Los Angeles, New York City, Philadelphia, Chicago, and many of our other owned and operated station markets. And they crank through 50 million home mortgage refinance loan applications to be able to come to the conclusion that you mentioned at the top of the show here. Again, that homes in predominantly Black neighborhoods nearly 5 times more likely to be underappraised for those mortgage refinance applications than in predominantly white neighborhoods. So we aim on this project, and that's the only way something so big, it's something that has gone undiscussed for so long that we could dig into it in the way that we do in Our America Lowballed.
So, Julian, what happens when a family suspects they may think that they are being lowballed? What do they do? What's the steps they can take?
So they do have options and they do have recourse. And before I walk through it right here, I want to give everyone a plug of where they can find it if they need to find it later. It's going to be lowballed.abc. That's lowballed.abc, and go to the more/about section. And we've actually compiled a step-by-step guide for folks to be able to take action if they believe they've been lowballed in a home appraisal. The first step is right after you get that appraisal that you believe is too low, ask the lender for an ROV, a reconsideration of value. This is essentially you flagging to the lender saying, hey, I think there's something wrong with this appraisal. Can you take another look at it? The lender will then determine if they believe that there is enough there, right? If you have enough cause, and they can go a couple of different routes. They can kick it back. First they could flat out say, no, we don't believe that there is a problem with this appraisal. Secondly, they could kick it back to the appraiser and say, you need to take another look at this. The homeowner sent these comps in the neighborhood, and we believe that there might be something wrong, so take another look at it. That gives the appraiser a chance to reconsider the value, right? Reconsider that appraised value, and they can make adjustments to the form. And that could essentially be the end of it there. If you then get the refreshed appraisal back and you think it's all good, or they can hire a new appraiser altogether. And that's what happened.
The homeowner.
Well, the lender can go ahead and hire a new appraiser to come out. And that's what happens with the Austin and Marin City. They got a second appraiser, and that's when they whitewashed the home and the home value skyrocketed by $500,000. If you don't find recourse in that, and the reality is most folks, when they do ask for that reconsideration of value, they don't get it. They flat out don't get it. And that's when you need to take action by reaching out to your local fair housing, civil rights organizations. If you go to the National Fair Housing Alliance website, we link all of that on our website. You'll be able to get connected with local resources, people that can help you file state complaints. They can help you file federal complaints with HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and potentially they can even help you file lawsuits. That's certainly the case of the Austins and Marin City.
And someone who might say, well, that sounds like a process, Julian. I don't have the time or the resources to do all that. What's your response?
I will say you're not wrong. It is a process, and this can take months, potentially even years to receive resolution. But we have to talk about it. We have to file these complaints so it can be shown that this is truly affecting folks. If it's underreported, it's easy to brush it off and say, oh, well, we only received X amount of reports in this calendar year of appraisal discrimination. So this really can't be a systemic issue. But filing those complaints is so important. And that's why I would say reach out to your local fair housing civil rights organizations, because they can help you step by step, literally hold your hand, even complete the paperwork for you in some cases to make sure that you are given the recourse that you deserve.
And so this is America, Our America Lowballed, Julian Glover. Julian, before we let you go, so this will debut, and you said there's several other episodes in the works. Do we expect that this will be? Has there been a commitment? Is what I'm asking, to continue this series, because it's so important, and it's you think about it. This has been going on forever. It could have been done years and years ago. It's being done now, which is important. Can we expect that this is a series that ABC has really gotten behind, and that it won't be a handful of episodes and then done?
That's a great question. There's certainly a commitment to see this story through here at ABC News and the ABC-owned television stations. Again, Lowballed debuts on Hulu and all of our 24/7 streaming apps and platforms. It'll be airing on air, like you mentioned, the weekend of December 3rd and 4th. And that'll be an hour-long special. From there, we are already working on part 2. I don't want to say too much about that now, as that might compromise the investigation and where we are in the current stage of it. But there will certainly, excuse me, there will certainly be a part 2 with more to come. And we're going to continue to follow it every step of the way, and still until we get some resolution and see some solutions at the local, state, and federal level.
Do you do any narration, Julian? That voice, just that narrator voice.
Just when I'm anchoring the news, also at ABC 7 News. So if you're watching in the Bay Area, check us out. ABC 7 News. I'll be on Midday Live at 11 a.m.
You got to check Julian out. Just if for no other reason, just to hear that narration type voice.
You're one to talk, my friend. You're one to talk. Smooth yourself, brother. Smooth yourself.
Listen, I can only go to bed, pray, and dream that I come up with a voice like that. That's for sure.
You're too kind. You're too kind.
Julian Glover, the executive producer for Our America Lowballed. You gotta check it out. This is such a vital story. We're so glad that you have teamed up with ABC Networks to do this. This is fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing this with the Black Press of America, Julian, and all the success on this. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope to be back when we debut part 2.
Hey, you're welcome. You're definitely welcome.
All right.
All right. Take care.